I never thought a single yes could cost me everything. But there I was, gripping the edge of the office bathroom sink, staring at my own reflection like I was waiting for an answer. The fluorescent light above buzzed faintly. My fingers dug into the cold porcelain. My chest felt tight, like I had been holding my breath for too long. I looked fine. That was the problem. Fine was what I had settled for my entire life. I had just said yes. Again. Yes to another meaningless project. Yes to another late night at the office. Yes to another year of playing it safe. When Mark, my boss, had asked, I hadn't even hesitated. We need you on this, Liam. You're the most reliable one here. And just like that, I nodded. I smiled. I agreed. Because that's what I did. Even when every part of me screamed no. I turned on the tap, splashing cold water onto my face. Maybe it would wake me up from this, whatever this was. Burnout? Quarter-life crisis? The slow, suffocating realization that I was living a life that wasn't even mine anymore? I didn't know. All I knew was that every time I looked at my own reflection, I saw a version of myself I didn't recognize. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. Big mistake. Instagram was still open from earlier. The first post on my feed? Big announcement. Party popper after years of playing it safe. I finally took the leap. Excited for this next chapter in my life. Hashtag dream job, hashtag no regrets. It was from Ben, an old college friend. I froze. Ben and I used to be the same, young, hungry, filled with ideas about what we were going to do with our lives. Late nights in dorm rooms, hyping each other up, swearing we wouldn't settle. Except now, he was out there, making moves, taking risks. And me? I was still here, still waiting, still convincing myself that one day, I'd make a change. I locked my phone and shoved it back in my pocket. My chest tightened again. How many times had I done this? Compared my life to people online? Told myself that they had something I didn't? More courage, more luck, more whatever it was that made people take the leap. I exhaled, long and slow. No, I had responsibilities. Rent, bills, a career I had worked for. I couldn't just throw it all away because I had some existential itch, right? I shook off the thought and stepped back into the office. Rows of identical gray cubicles stretched out before me, filled with people who had probably once dreamed of something bigger too. My desk felt smaller than usual, like it was closing in. I sat down, clicked open my inbox, and there it was. An email that didn't belong. I blinked at the sender's name. Elliot Carter. My stomach dropped. I hadn't heard that name in years. With shaky fingers, I clicked the message. Subject: let's talk about your future. Hey Liam. It's been a while. I came across something today and immediately thought of you. There's an opening at Everett & Company, exactly the kind of role we used to talk about. It's fast-moving, creative, high stakes. I know things didn't align back then, but if you're still interested in making the jump, let's catch up. No pressure, just a conversation. Let me know. Looking forward to hearing from you. Elliot. I reread it. Then again, Everett & Company. I knew that name. Everyone in the industry did. This wasn't just some job. This was the job. The kind of opportunity that didn't come twice. Elliot had believed in me once, back when I was fresh out of college, back when I had ideas, back when I hadn't convinced myself to play it safe. And now, here he was, offering me a door out, a lifeline. I hovered over the reply button. My fingers twitched. This was it. The opportunity one had been waiting for. And yet, I hesitated. Because I always hesitated. Because the second I started to reach for something more, the doubts crept in. It's too risky. You have a stable job. Why throw it away? What if you fail? The weight of every past hesitation pressed down on me. The unfinished projects, the opportunities one let slip away, the almosts and maybes I had buried under the comfort of routine. I exhaled sharply. And then, hey, you got a sec? I nearly jumped. Mark was standing next to my desk, smiling like he hadn't just handed me another year of mediocrity an hour ago. Yeah, of course, I said, minimizing the email like it was something I shouldn't even be considering. Mark pulled up a chair. Listen, I wanted to run something by you. We're restructuring a bit, and there's an opening for a senior role. I stilled. We need someone who's dependable, someone who's proven they can handle the responsibility, he continued. I want that to be you. I swallowed. A promotion. The thing I was supposed to want. The thing that would make all of this, the stress, the late nights, the feeling of being stuck, worth it. Except, as I sat there, nodding, forcing a smile, all I could think about was Elliot's email. Two paths. Two futures. One was safe, familiar. The other? I had no idea. You don't have to decide right away, Mark said. But think about it. I nodded. But the truth was, I already knew. I had been thinking about this for years. I turned back to my laptop, opened my inbox. The email from Elliot was still there, waiting for me. I started typing. Elliot, wow, it's been a while. I'd love to. Another notification popped up. Mark, can you hop on a quick call? I clenched my jaw. Not now. I deleted my draft. Shut my laptop. Maybe tomorrow. Except, I knew how this went. Tomorrow would become next week. Next month. Next year. In one day, I'd wake up and realize I had run out of time. I told myself I'd respond in the morning. I didn't. The next day, I told myself I'd reply after lunch. Then after work. Then after dinner. By the time I lay in bed that night, the email was still sitting in my inbox, unread since the moment I first opened it. I wanted to believe I was just waiting for the right time, but the truth was simpler. I was afraid. Afraid of what it would mean to answer. Afraid of what it would mean if I didn't. At work, things moved forward without me. Mark was already treating me like I had accepted the promotion. He pulled me into more meetings, gave me more responsibilities, spoke about my future in the company like it was set in stone. I didn't correct him. The more I let it happen, the harder it became to see a way out. Every few hours, I opened Elliot's email, typed a few words, deleted them, rewrote them, deleted them again. Then came Friday. The office was unusually quiet that afternoon. Most people had either gone home early or were pretending to work while counting down the minutes until the weekend. I was doing the same, avoiding eye contact, hoping I could make it out before Mark threw another project my way. But I didn't make it. He appeared at my desk just as I was shutting down my computer, his expression unreadable. Hey, got a minute? I considered lying, saying I had somewhere to be, but I knew it wouldn't matter. I followed him to the conference room, where a folder with my name on it sat in the center of the table. Close the door, he said. I did. He sat across from me, leaning forward slightly, elbows on the table. I wanted to have a real conversation, just you and me. No pressure, no office politics. Just the truth. He tapped the folder. This is yours. Your promotion. Everything's ready to go. I just need your signature. But I can tell something's off. I stayed silent. I know you, Liam. You're not someone who hesitates. So, what's going on? I hesitated. Mark had been my boss for 3 years. He wasn't a bad person. He was the kind of manager who rewarded hard work, who noticed when someone was putting in the extra hours. And I had been that person for a long time. But that was exactly the problem. I stared at the folder, my name printed in bold letters on the cover. I just need to think about it. Mark nodded slowly. All right, let's talk about what's really stopping you. I felt the walls closing in. You're not the first person to get an offer from somewhere else, he said. If that's what this is, just tell me. We can match it. It's not about the money. Then what is it? I opened my mouth, but no words came. Mark exhaled. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. I fought for you to get this. I put my reputation on the line because I believe in you. I believe you're a leader. But I need to know if you're still all in. Because if you're not, we need to have a different conversation. My stomach turned. He wasn't just offering me a promotion anymore. He was giving me an ultimatum. I could feel the moment slipping away from me, the decision being made for me. I could nod, sign the papers, lock myself into this path. It would be easier. I wouldn't have to risk anything. But something in me wouldn't let me do it. Mark sat back, watching me carefully. Liam, if you don't want this, tell me now. I thought about Ben, about Jessica, about every person I had seen on social media who had taken the leap I never did. I thought about Elliot's email, waiting for me to be the person I used to say I wanted to be. I took a breath. I don't want it. Mark blinked. What? I forced myself to meet his eyes. I don't want the promotion. Silence. Mark leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. For a moment, I thought he might actually laugh. You're serious? I nodded. He studied me like he was waiting for me to change my mind. I don't get it. You've worked your ass off for this. You've put in the hours. You've built a reputation here. You're really going to throw that away? I wasn't sure what to say. I hadn't figured that part out yet. Mark exhaled sharply. All right. If that's your decision, I respect it. But I need you to understand what this means. He closed the folder and slid it aside. If you're not moving forward, I can't keep giving you these opportunities. Someone else will take them. Someone else will move up. I nodded. He stood, signaling the conversation was over. I followed his lead. As I reached the door, he spoke again. For what it's worth, I hope this isn't a mistake. I turned back. Me too. Then I walked out. Back at my desk, my hands were shaking. I had done it. I had said no. And now, there was only one thing left to do. I opened my laptop, found Elliot's email, and typed 4 words. Let's set up a call. Then, before I could second-guess it, I hit send. And just like that, everything changed. I expected to feel relief. I didn't. When I walked out of the office that evening, the city felt different. The streets weren't busier, the lights weren't brighter, but something in me had shifted. The weight I thought would disappear after saying no to Mark hadn't lifted. If anything, it had gotten heavier. I had cut myself off from the safe path. There was no promotion, no next step in the company, no more pretending that I was fine with how things were. The email to Elliot was sent. It was final. It was happening. I checked my phone more times than I wanted to admit. No response. It had only been an hour, but every minute felt stretched. I kept wondering if I had waited too long, if maybe he had sent that email to 10 other people, if maybe my hesitation had cost me the opportunity one had barely managed to reach for. The train ride home was silent except for the occasional voice of the conductor. I sat in my usual seat by the window, staring at my reflection, thinking about how different I had felt in this exact spot just yesterday. I had been another person then, someone who still had a choice to turn back. Now, I was in free fall. I reached my apartment, unlocked the door, and tossed my bag onto the couch. The room felt small. I walked to the kitchen, opened the fridge, closed it again. I wasn't hungry. I wasn't tired. I was just waiting. The vibration of my phone made my chest tighten. I grabbed it immediately. Elliot Carter. I opened the email without breathing. Liam, great to hear from you. I was hoping you'd reach out. Let's talk tomorrow. 10 a.m. work for you? Let me know, and I'll send over a call link. Looking forward to it. I stared at the screen. I had expected excitement, maybe nerves, but all I felt was something cold creeping into my stomach. I typed back, keeping it short. 10 a.m. works. See you then. The moment I hit send, it felt real in a way it hadn't before. This wasn't just an idea anymore. It wasn't a dream or an unanswered email sitting in my inbox. It was happening. There was no turning back. Morning came too fast. I woke up before my alarm, staring at the ceiling in the dark. My brain was already running through scenarios, most of them bad. What if I didn't have the right answers? What if Elliot realized he had made a mistake reaching out? What if this was just a courtesy call and not a real opportunity? By the time 10 a.m. arrived, I was sitting at my desk, laptop open, waiting for the meeting to start. The moment the call connected, Elliot's face appeared on the screen. He looked exactly the same, a sharp suit, confident smile, the kind of presence that made you believe he knew exactly what he was doing at all times. Liam, he said, leaning forward slightly. It's been a while. I nodded, forcing a smile. Yeah, it has. I was surprised to hear from you, he continued. But in a good way. How have things been? I could have lied. Said things were great, that I was thriving. But I didn't. Complicated. He chuckled. That's one way to put it. He glanced at another screen. I'll be straight with you. When I sent that email, I wasn't sure if you'd answer. I know how it goes. People get comfortable. Life happens. But I was hoping you hadn't lost that drive you had back when we first talked about working together. Something in me tensed. I haven't. That's what I want to hear. He sat back slightly, studying me. I won't waste your time. Everett and Company is expanding. We need people who can handle high-pressure, high-stakes work. People who don't just follow directions but create their own path. That was you, Liam. At least, that's who you were when we met. Is that still who you are? The question landed harder than I expected. I wanted to say yes without hesitation, but the truth was, I didn't know. The version of me Elliot remembered, the one who had ideas, ambition, fire, I wasn't sure if that person still existed. I wanted to be, I said finally. Elliot nodded. Then here's the deal. There's a position open. It's not an easy one. It'll push you in ways your current job never has. But if you want it, if you're willing to take the risk, I can get you in front of the right people. He paused. But I need to know you're serious. If this is just a midlife crisis, or if you're looking for an easy out, this isn't it. I exhaled, forcing myself to meet his eyes. I wouldn't have reached out if I wasn't serious. Elliot watched me for a moment, then nodded. Good. He typed something on his keyboard. I'll set up a second call with the team. We'll see what happens from there. The call ended with a few more details, a date, a time. When I closed my laptop, My hands were shaking. I had done it. I had taken the first step, but I wasn't relieved, because now I had to prove that I hadn't waited too long. I thought the hardest part was saying yes. I was wrong. The days leading up to the second interview moved slower than any I could remember. I went to work, sat at my desk, answered emails, joined meetings, but none of it felt real anymore. I had one foot out the door, yet I was still trapped in a place that no longer felt like mine. Mark hadn't said anything since our conversation. No extra projects, no check-ins, nothing. It was as if he had already moved on, like I had been erased the second I turned down the promotion. It should have made things easier. It didn't. The morning of the interview, I woke up feeling like I had already failed. I had spent hours reading up on Everett and Company, memorizing their recent projects, researching their team. It wasn't enough. I didn't have the right experience. I wasn't one of those people who walked into meetings with perfect answers and effortless confidence. I had spent too many years saying yes to the wrong things, and now I was standing in front of the biggest opportunity of my life, unprepared. Elliot had said this job wasn't for people who followed directions. It was for people who created their own path. I wasn't sure I even knew how to do that anymore. The interview was scheduled for 11 a.m. By 10:50, I was sitting at my desk, staring at the meeting link, wondering what would happen if I just didn't click it. If I ignored the email, if I let this chance slip away, if I convinced myself that staying put wasn't so bad after all. At 10:58, I clicked the link before I could stop myself. Elliot was already on the call, along with two others, Lauren Mitchell, Director of Strategy, and Chris Nolan, Head of Client Relations. Their names were just words on a screen until they turned on their cameras, and suddenly, I was face to face with people who had the power to decide whether this moment would change my life or just be another regret. Lauren spoke first. "Liam, thanks for taking the time to meet with us. Elliot's told us a lot about you." I forced a smile. "Hopefully, all good things." Chris didn't smile. "We'll find out." I nodded, gripping my hands under the desk to keep them steady. Lauren leaned forward slightly. "You've been at your current company for a while. What made you decide you're ready for a change?" I had practiced this answer. I had told myself exactly what I was going to say. But sitting there, looking at them, the scripted response felt hollow. I could give them a polished answer about growth and new challenges, but that wasn't why I was here. I waited too long, I said before I could stop myself. I kept convincing myself that if I just worked hard, the right opportunity would come to me. That if I stayed on the safe path, eventually I'd get to where I wanted to be. But it doesn't work that way. Chris raised an eyebrow. "And where is it you want to be?" I hesitated, feeling the weight of my own words. "Somewhere I don't feel like I'm wasting my time." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Lauren smiled. "That's a better answer than most people give." Chris, however, wasn't done. "What do you actually bring to the table? You don't have experience at a firm like this. You've been working in a completely different structure, at a completely different level. What makes you think you can handle this?" I had expected this question. I didn't have an answer. Elliot cut in before I could speak. "I've worked with Liam before. He doesn't need hand-holding. He adapts fast." Chris didn't look convinced. "That's great, but adaptation isn't enough. We need people who can lead. You say you wasted time, but we don't have time to waste. If we bring you in, what do we actually get?" I had never felt smaller in a meeting. I knew how this was supposed to go. I was supposed to sell myself, list off accomplishments, prove that I was worth the risk. But I had spent so much time second-guessing myself that I wasn't sure I believed any of it. I thought about Mark, about how easy it would have been to sign that folder, to stay where it was comfortable, about how I had sat in that office for years, convincing myself that if I just waited long enough, something better would appear. No one was coming to save me. I straightened, forcing myself to meet Chris's stare. I don't have the same background as other candidates. I don't have a list of industry names on my resume. But I know how to figure things out. I know how to work harder than anyone else in the room. And I know what it's like to have to fight for an opportunity instead of just being handed one. So if you're looking for someone who already knows how to do everything perfectly, I'm not your guy. But if you want someone who won't stop until they prove they belong here, I am. Chris didn't react. Lauren glanced at Elliot, then back at me. "All right, Liam. We'll be in touch." The screen went dark. The call was over. I sat there, staring at my reflection, not sure if I had just saved myself or ruined everything. I checked my phone every 10 minutes for the rest of the day. Nothing. By the time evening rolled around, I had convinced myself it was over. I had said the wrong thing. I hadn't sold myself hard enough. Chris hadn't been convinced. Maybe Elliot had tried to push for me, but in the end, I was just another candidate they could afford to ignore. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed the call in my head, dissecting every moment. Maybe I should have been more aggressive. Maybe I should have talked more about my accomplishments. Maybe I shouldn't have admitted that I had wasted time. But that was the truth, wasn't it? I had wasted time. That was why I had been sitting in that interview in the first place. Morning came, and there was still no email. I went through my usual routine, but everything felt pointless. The job I hadn't officially left yet was already unbearable. Every meeting felt like a waste of time. Every email felt like someone else's problem. The walls of my cubicle had never felt smaller. I was still here, stuck, trapped in the same cycle I had finally tried to break out of. At lunch, I left the office without telling anyone. I walked with no direction, ending up in a small coffee shop I had never been to before. I bought a drink I didn't want, just to have an excuse to sit down. I stared at my phone. Still nothing. It wasn't just about the job anymore. It was about what it meant if I didn't get it. If they said no, what was left? I couldn't go back to how things were. I had already burned that bridge. Mark wouldn't forget that I had rejected the promotion. I had made my choice, and if this fell apart, I would have nothing to show for it except a ruined career and a resume with nowhere to go. The phone rang. I almost dropped it. I saw Elliot's name on the screen, and my hands clenched around the device so tightly I thought I might crack it. I answered before I had time to think. "Liam," he said. "Got a minute?" I forced my voice to sound normal. "Yeah. What's up?" There was a pause. Too long. My heart pounded. "They liked you," he said finally. I blinked. "What?" "Lauren and Chris. They think you have potential. They like that you didn't try to give them a rehearsed speech. They like that you answered honestly. That's rare." I didn't breathe. "So what does that mean?" Another pause. "They want to see if you mean what you said," Elliot said. "They're giving you a shot. But not the job yet." I gripped the edge of the table. "What does that mean?" "You'll start as a trial hire. 3 months. No guarantees after that. You prove yourself, you stay. If not, you're out. A trial. A test. No safety net. No real security. But a chance." "When do I start?" I asked. "Monday," Elliot said. "We'll send over everything today. Get ready. This isn't going to be easy. I don't expect it to be." "Good." He paused. "And Liam, don't waste this." The call ended. I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling the weight of everything settle in. This was happening. No excuses. No turning back. I had fought for this, and now, I had to prove I deserved it. The contract came through an hour later. I read it twice before signing, my hands steady even though my brain was screaming at me. It was real. The email confirming my start date, my onboarding schedule, my first assignments. It was all there. I forwarded my resignation letter to HR without thinking about it too hard. By the time I realized what I had done, there was no way to undo it. The response from HR was cold. My final day would be Friday. No counteroffer. No questions. Just instructions on returning my company laptop and keycard. By the time I went back to my desk, everyone knew. Mark didn't even look at me when he walked past. That evening, I packed up my desk in silence. No goodbyes. No speeches. Just quiet exits from people who had already decided I was making a mistake. Friday came and went. Monday, I walked into Everett & Company for the first time. The office was nothing like my old one. It was sharp, fast, alive. People moved with purpose. Conversations happened in passing without hesitation. There was no waiting. No standing still. The energy was completely different. Elliot met me at the front desk. "Welcome to the deep end," he said. I followed him through the office, past glass-walled conference rooms where deals were being made in real time. People moved fast. Conversations snapped like puzzle pieces falling into place. No one was waiting for permission. "This is where you prove you belong," Elliot said as he led me to my desk. 3 months. You keep up, you stay. You don't, you're out. No hand-holding, no training wheels. You figure it out or you don't. I nodded, gripping the arm of my chair as I sat down. The reality of what I had walked into was starting to settle in. This wasn't just a job. It was survival. Elliot handed me a folder. "Your first assignment. I want a strategy proposal on my desk by the end of the day." I flipped it open, scanning the details. The project was bigger than anything I had worked on before. There was no structure, no guidelines, just a problem that needed solving. Elliot studied me. "Too much." I shook my head. "No." "Good." He walked away without another word. I sat there for a moment, staring at the pages in front of me. The room buzzed with conversations, deals, decisions. I wasn't ready, but I was here. And for the first time, there was no going back. I thought I understood pressure. I didn't. The moment I sat down, the clock started ticking. The project was a mess, half-baked ideas, missing data, no clear direction. I wasn't sure if that was intentional, a test to see if I could work without guidance, or if the company simply moved too fast for anyone to hold my hand. Either way, I had no choice but to figure it out. By noon, I was buried in reports, cross-checking numbers, trying to piece together something that made sense. No one had given me instructions, so I had to make my own. I studied the client, their competitors, the market trends, anything that could give me an edge. There was no safety net, no backup plan. If I failed, I wasn't sure I'd get another chance. At my old job, I would have scheduled a meeting, asked for clarification, made sure every detail was in place before moving forward. Here, that wasn't an option. People moved fast, decisions were made on instinct, hesitation wasn't tolerated. I had to adapt or I was done. At 2 p.m., Elliot appeared at my desk. "How's it going?" I looked up from my screen. "Working through it." He nodded. "Good. Don't overthink it. Just give me something." I exhaled as he walked away. The unspoken message was clear: perfection didn't matter, speed did. I forced myself to stop second-guessing and started writing. By 5 p.m., my desk was covered in notes, half-empty coffee cups, and a printed draft of my proposal. It wasn't perfect, but it was done. I printed a final copy, walked to Elliot's office, and set it on his desk without a word. He barely glanced up. "I'll look at it later." I nodded and left. The next morning, I was at my desk before anyone else, waiting for feedback. Elliot didn't say anything. Neither did Lauren or Chris. No emails, no comments. The silence stretched. I tried to focus on other tasks, but my mind kept circling back to that proposal. Had I missed something? Was I already failing? At 3 p.m., my inbox pinged. A meeting invite. I clicked it open. Elliot Carter, Lauren Mitchell, Chris Nolan, Conference Room B. No subject. My stomach dropped. I grabbed my notes and headed to the meeting room. Elliot and Lauren were already there when I arrived. Chris walked in a minute later, closing the door behind him. No one was smiling. Elliot tapped the printed proposal on the table. "Walk us through your thought process." I swallowed. I focused on 3 key areas. First, market positioning. The client is losing ground to competitors because their messaging is outdated. Second, audience targeting. Their campaigns are too broad. They need to refine their approach. Third, execution. They need a more aggressive digital strategy to regain relevance. Lauren nodded slightly, but Chris wasn't convinced. "You're making a lot of assumptions." I kept my voice steady. "They're based on data." Chris leaned forward. "Data isn't everything. Where's the creative approach? Where's the strategy that makes them stand out? Anyone can tell them they need better targeting. What are you bringing that they don't already know?" I had expected pushback, but not like this. I had worked all night to make sure my analysis was solid, but I had focused on facts, not innovation. Chris didn't care about facts. He wanted something bold. Elliot watched me, waiting. Lauren was unreadable. I had 2 choices: defend what I had written, or take a risk. I took a breath. All right, let's scrap the original proposal. If we're talking about standing out, they need to change their entire approach. They're not just competing on product, they're competing on perception. If they want to regain market share, they need to own a narrative that no one else is using. Chris raised an eyebrow. "Which is?" I didn't hesitate. "Transparency. They stop hiding behind generic marketing and start showing the actual process. The behind the scenes, the failures, the real work. People connect with brands they trust. Right now, they look like they're playing catch-up. We turned that into an advantage." Silence. Then Lauren smirked. "Now we're getting somewhere." Elliot tapped the paper again. "Rewrite it. Present it tomorrow." I nodded and left. By the time I got back to my desk, exhaustion hit me like a wall. But there was no time to rest. I had one night to fix everything. And this time, I couldn't afford to get it wrong. The office emptied out, but I stayed. I spread out every report, every document, every note I had taken. I pulled up past case studies, analyzed competitors, looked for proof that my new approach wasn't just different but effective. The strategy had to be bulletproof. I wasn't just proving my ability to this company, I was proving it to myself. At 9 p.m., I ordered coffee from a vending machine that tasted like burnt plastic. At 11 p.m., I rewrote the first half of the proposal after realizing I had been too vague. By 1 a.m., I had gone through every major brand that had pivoted successfully in the past 5 years, looking for patterns, mistakes, anything I could learn from. By 3 a.m., I had something that felt right. The final proposal was bolder, riskier. It didn't just recommend changes, it challenged the client to rethink everything. I had no idea if they would go for it, but at least I wouldn't walk into that room with a half-baked strategy. By the time I sent the final version to the printer, the office was silent. My hands were shaking, but I wasn't sure if it was exhaustion or nerves. I grabbed the papers and slid them into a folder, double-checking that everything was in place. It was almost 4 a.m. when I left. The streets were empty, the city quiet. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't second-guessing myself. Tomorrow, they would either see what I was capable of, or I would fail in the worst way possible. Either way, there was no turning back. I walked into the office running on 3 hours of sleep, gripping the folder like it held my entire future. No one knew I had spent the entire night reworking the strategy. No one cared. This wasn't a place that rewarded effort, only results. If what I had put together wasn't good enough, then nothing else mattered. Elliot was already in the conference room when I arrived. He was scrolling through his phone, a cup of coffee beside him, completely unfazed by what, to me, felt like the most important moment of my life. Chris and Lauren arrived a minute later, barely acknowledging me before taking their seats. No small talk. No pre-meeting chatter. Just work. Elliot looked at me. Let's hear it. I opened the folder, slid the revised proposal across the table, and started talking. I kept my voice steady. Every sentence had to count. I explained the core of the strategy first, why the client wasn't just losing ground but losing trust, why standard marketing tactics wouldn't fix it, why the only way forward was a complete shift in approach. They didn't need a better campaign. They needed a new identity. Chris leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. This is a complete overhaul. You're asking them to rebuild their entire brand. I nodded, because that's the only way they stop losing. Lauren flipped through the pages. You're suggesting they take a risk that could either make them stand out or completely backfire. They're already failing, I said. They have two choices, keep sinking or do something no one else is willing to do. If they keep playing it safe, they won't exist in 2 years. Elliot watched me, his expression unreadable. Chris was still skeptical. And you think this works? I don't think. I know. Silence. Then Elliot spoke. All right. He tapped the folder. We pitch it to the client this afternoon. I stared at him. This afternoon? Chris smirked. You want to be here, right? Welcome to the job. There was no time to process, no moment to catch my breath. I had spent all night putting this strategy together, and now I had less than 6 hours before I had to sell it to a client that had no reason to trust me. I spent every minute leading up to that meeting refining my pitch, anticipating objections, preparing for every possible way this could go wrong. No one came to check on me. No one offered help. This was my responsibility. If I failed, it was on me. At 3 p.m., I walked into the client meeting with Elliot and Lauren. The executives were already seated, waiting. I recognized their CEO from past research, sharp-eyed, impatient, known for firing entire teams if a campaign didn't perform. This wasn't just a presentation. It was a test. Elliot barely introduced me before nodding for me to start. I had rehearsed this pitch in my head 100 times, but none of that mattered now. I focused on the people in front of me, the problem they needed solved, the way they saw their own brand. I didn't just present numbers. I told them exactly why they were losing, how their competitors were winning, and what had to change before it was too late. Halfway through, the CEO cut in. This is a major shift. Why should we trust your judgment? I didn't hesitate. Because you hired this company for a reason. If what you were doing was working, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Lauren shot me a look, but Elliot stayed silent, letting me handle it. The CEO leaned back. And if we do this, what's the risk? If you execute it wrong, you look like you're overcorrecting. If you don't commit fully, you confuse your audience. But if you do it right, you don't just keep up with your competitors. You outlast them. Another silence. Then the CEO nodded once. We'll consider it. That was it. No confirmation, no clear answer. Just consideration. By the time we left the conference room, I felt like I had run a marathon. Lauren said nothing as she walked past me. Elliot didn't offer praise or criticism, just a short glance before heading to his office. I had no idea if I had just secured my place at this company or signed my own failure notice. The rest of the afternoon moved in a haze. I sat at my desk, going through emails, trying to focus, but my brain kept looping the meeting in my head. Every word, every reaction, every hesitation. Had I come across as too aggressive? Too inexperienced? I should have said more. Or maybe I should have said less. I had no way of knowing what they were thinking, and that uncertainty was worse than outright rejection. At 6 p.m., Elliot appeared at my desk. Come with me. I grabbed my notebook and followed him into his office. He closed the door behind us, leaned against his desk, and crossed his arms. How do you think it went? I kept my voice measured. I think I gave them a strategy that could work. You did. He nodded. And you handled the pushback well. I waited. There was a but coming. Elliot tilted his head slightly. But you didn't close them. I clenched my jaw. They said they'd consider it. That's not a yes. I exhaled slowly. What should I have done differently? He studied me for a moment. You told them what needed to change. You didn't make them need to change. That's the difference. I nodded, absorbing that. Elliot straightened. Chris isn't convinced about you. Lauren thinks you've got potential but isn't sure if you can keep up. He paused. I pushed for you to be here. That means if you fail, it reflects on me. I met his eyes. I won't fail. He held my gaze for a moment, then nodded once. Good. Because this isn't over. I frowned. What do you mean? The CEO wants to meet with you. Alone. A sharp silence stretched between us. I forced myself to stay still. When? Tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. I took a breath. This wasn't just about the project anymore. This was about me. And I had one shot to prove I belonged here. I barely slept. By the time my alarm went off, I was already awake, staring at the ceiling, running through every possible way this meeting could go. The CEO wanted to meet with me alone. No Elliot, no Lauren, no one to step in if I messed up. This wasn't just about the strategy anymore. It was about me. Whether I belonged here. Whether I was worth the risk. I arrived at the office an hour early, but it didn't make a difference. Time didn't slow down. I went over the strategy again, even though I knew it by heart. I checked my email, read through the company's recent reports, refreshed my memory on competitors. It was a distraction, nothing more. None of it would matter if I couldn't convince him. At 8:59, I stood outside the CEO's office. I knocked once, pushed the door open, and stepped inside. He sat behind a massive glass desk, scrolling through his phone. His presence filled the room without him even looking up. I had seen him in interviews, read articles about him, studied his leadership style before the first meeting. He was known for being ruthless, direct, a man who didn't waste time on people who weren't valuable to him. He set his phone down and gestured to the chair in front of him. Sit. I sat. He leaned back, studying me. Do you know why you're here? I kept my hand steady on my lap. Because you're considering whether or not to move forward with the strategy. No, he tilted his head. That's already been decided. We're doing it. I straightened slightly. Then why am I here? He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. Because I don't know if you should be. I didn't react. You had one shot yesterday, he continued. You had to convince me, and you didn't. Elliot believes in you. Lauren sees potential. Chris thinks you're a waste of time. I don't care about any of that. I care about what you do in this moment, right now, sitting in front of me. I stayed quiet, waiting. He tapped his fingers against the desk. Tell me why I should keep you here. This was it. The moment that decided everything. I had spent years hesitating, waiting for permission, convincing myself I needed more time. This time, I didn't think. Because you don't need another person who plays it safe, I said. You need someone who sees what's coming before anyone else does. Someone who isn't just following trends but creating them. That's me. He studied me, unimpressed. That's just words. Why should I believe you? I leaned forward slightly. Because I don't have a safety net. I don't have a backup plan. I made a choice to be here, and I'm going to make sure I don't regret it. You don't need to believe me. You'll see it. The room went quiet. Then he nodded once. All right. He picked up his phone, typed something, then set it down. You're in. I exhaled slowly. This isn't a win, he said. It's a starting point. You have 3 months to prove you belong. You don't. You're out. No second chances. I met his gaze. I understand. Good. Get out. I stood, turned, and walked out without hesitation. When I stepped back into the office, Elliot was leaning against my desk, arms crossed. How'd it go? I grabbed a pen, clicked it once, and met his eyes. I'm still here. Elliot nodded. Good. Then, as if the conversation was already over, he handed me a folder. We're meeting in 20 minutes. Read this. I opened it. Another client. Another problem. No time to process what had just happened. No time to celebrate. That was how things worked here. You either kept up or got left behind. I flipped through the pages, already shifting gears. My past life, hesitation, doubt, waiting felt distant. I wasn't the same person who had walked into that first meeting. I had made a choice. This time, I wasn't looking back.